I too want to join my colleague from Missouri, Senator Blunt, and others today to pay tribute to the life of Billy Graham. We lost last week, Mr. President, a man of great faith. And at the end of the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus gives his disciples the Great Commission, where he says, "Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you." If any one man, it may be said to have fulfilled that charge, it was Billy Graham. Over a ministry that spanned more than 60 years, Billy Graham truly made disciples of all nations, preaching the gospel in the United States and around the world. In the days since his death, many have remembered Billy Graham as a spiritual advisor to several presidents, which he was. But neither his association with presidents nor the famous of this world ever distracted him from his primary purpose, which was making sure that the good news of Christ reached everyone. From China to South Africa to Russia to Australia to his home state of North Carolina, and his countless appearances on television, video, and the internet, Billy Graham labored tirelessly for the gospel. I think it's fair to say, Mr. President, that no one in our lifetime has lived a life of greater impact for the cause of Christ. And I remember as a young child growing up in my home state of South Dakota, when the Crusades would come on and we would turn them on along with my parents, and you had Billy Graham, you had George Beverly Shea, Cliff Barrow, and the message of hope, the message of grace, the message of redemption that came across so clearly and impacted so many people, not only here in the United States, but all around the world. And it was great to hear Michael W. Smith today sing that great song, "Just As I Am," that was always offered at the end of every Billy Graham crusade as an invitation for people to come to know the Lord that he knew. My wife Kimberly and I were privileged to sing in the choir for Billy Graham's 1986 crusade here in Washington, D.C., an experience that neither of us will ever forget. He reminded us, as he reminded everyone, that ultimately there is one thing that matters in life, and that is serving Christ. In the days since his death, many people have repeated one of Billy Graham's quotes in which he paraphrased the American evangelist Dwight L. Moody. And I think it sums up Billy Graham's message pretty effectively. He said, "Someday you will read or hear that Billy Graham is dead. Don't you believe a word of it. I shall be more alive than I am now. I will have just changed my address. I will have gone into the presence of God." End quote. Mr. President, I remember in that 1986 crusade, there was a story that was written, presumably Washington Post, in which he was interviewed, and I remember, and I'm paraphrasing, the question was asked what he wanted to be remembered for, what he wanted his epitaph to be when he died. And he said that I preached the gospel of Christ, that I had opportunities to do other things, but that I never deviated. And Mr. President, he never deviated. Billy Graham has departed this life and we mourn. But I am confident that right now he is rejoicing in the presence of the Lord. And in the book of Acts, it talks about King David, and it says that he served God's purpose for his generation. And I think it can be said that Billy Graham truly did serve God's purpose for his generation, as many generations of Americans and many generations of people all over the world have been so impacted by his life and his very consequential ministry. Mr. President, I yield the floor.